Hi, thank you guys for coming after lunch. I'm Casey Fleetwood. I am what I've now noticed I have a nickname which is called Casey of the North, which sounds like a Wizard of Oz thing. I'm one of two state coordinators. So my colleague Jody Sirocco is a state coordinator helping districts in Southern Nevada, and I work with districts in Northern Nevada. So I'm Casey of the North. I am here today to present to you. Okay. Hold on, let me so I'm from the North. My co-presenter, who will be presenting around 2 o'clock-ish, is our highlight exemplar. This is Irene. She is from Lemon Valley Elementary School, which if you were paying attention at all during the award ceremony, they were the highest awardee of their district in Washoe County. So like, yeah, good for them, good for them. Yeah. So anyways, we're going to talk about Introduction to Tier 2 supports today. So this is kind of a primer, basic level, just getting you started with Tier 2 implementation. Can you just show me, show of hands, how many of you are in some phase of implementing Tier 2? Okay. How many of you are thinking about it? Cool. How many of you know 0 things? Cool. We have the whole spectrum. That's great. Okay. I'll do my best to try and hit all those needs. So this is us, and my clicker already doesn't work. That's fine. I'll work on that. Okay, so I need to thank the people who allow me to be here. That would be the Department of Education. As you know or may not know, I'm federally funded, so thank you, Congress. Having Catherine Cortez Masto staff here was great today because they're awesome. Our senators are so supportive in the work that we do. The School Climate Transformation Grant, which is in its 2nd iteration here in Nevada. The Nevada Department of Education, particularly the Office of Safe and Respectful Learning Environments, which is where our PBIS and MTSS work comes through at the State Department, and then our collaborating school districts in Nevada, many of you of which belong to those entities, particularly today's exemplar. Will this one work? No, we're winging it. All right, that's fun. Here are our topics that we're going to cover today. We are going to sort of do an introduction. More importantly, I think I want to spend some time on what are the prerequisites for Tier 2 implementation. A lot of times people are like, wow, I really just want to get Tier 2 supports in place right away. We have found that doing that prematurely does not bode well for many people, and we're going to try and tell you what rookie mistakes to avoid. You might do them anyways, but at least I can say I told you so. We're going to talk about universal screening and where that fits, and then just some really basic or common high utility Tier 2 interventions that schools will begin to implement when they first start Tier 2 services. If you want more advanced, more specific, more customized Tier 2 interventions, there is an advanced Tier 2 talk later after this talk in another room somewhere that will go into more differentiated, more customizable interventions. Okay, so this is sort of like the basics. All right, and then our exemplar, and then questions and answers. Jody, could I get some clicker support? Yep. Awesome. Okay, so here's what we're going to do with Tier 2. What are the goals of Tier 2? It's not to say that we have a secondary tier and good for us. It's that first of all we want to provide remediation, right? So what I like to say is Tier 1 is our core. Our advanced tiers are core plus more, right? So it's not in lieu of Tier 1. It is supplemental to Tier 1. Something that's really important for Tier 2 is that we have predetermined data decision rules. Okay, this is a really big piece in terms of educational equity. How many of you have had students that have needed something more, core plus more? How many of you have made that decision arbitrarily? My hand's up. Yeah, I don't know. It's not, whatever we're doing for everyone else just isn't working. Give them all I've got. Give her all I've got, right? What we really need to do is have some sort of threshold that determines what level of support do you need. Because oftentimes we're really good at doing Tier 1 and jumping straight to Tier 3. Is this a common experience for you guys? It was a common experience for me. And that's sort of you go on the fire ambulance and put out all the fires, right? How do you make changes to interventions? How do you change levels of supports, making sure that those interventions are effective and evidence-based? And fidelity of implementation. Kent really hit this well, so I'm going to go light there. Any luck?
I will click it for you.
That's awesome. Okay. So a common thing, so this is such great room support. A common mistake that we make in education as educators, and I'm guilty of this myself because I tend to over-support people. It's just my nature. I tend to be a real heavy like modeler, scaffolder. I don't want to ever see people fail, so I give lots and lots of support because all those poor people, and I'm talking about even the adults I support now, right? Like I have a hard time taking off the training wheels. So we oftentimes wait for kids to fail before we want to do something about it, right? Oh, they might not need tier 2. She's just so young. Oh, he's going to grow out of it. Oh, I just want to wait till after Christmas. Let's give them time, right? Maybe you haven't said these things. I've said these things with the best of intentions, right? Oh, they're going to be fine. But the problem is that we wait too long, and oftentimes why our tier 2 interventions aren't sufficient when we start implementing them is that we're beyond the point of remediation. We're now in triage, right? We missed that window of opportunity where we could do a light lift to make an easy correction for a child. They've gone sort of past that threshold where now we need to do some more intensive support for them, right? So with our best of intentions, don't wait for them to fall, right? Kids don't grow out of behavior problems. They're more likely to grow into them. So don't wait, right? Don't be hesitant. Yeah. All right, so this is gonna work. We're gonna talk about the prerequisites to tier 2. So this is super important because people get all jazzed about, oh, I got my tier 1 in, I wanna get my tier 2 in. I just want us to take a breath and know that implementation is a journey. They used to say it takes 3 to 5 years to get your full tiers up and running. Now it's more like 6 to 8, knowing that implementation ebbs and flows, right? So what do you need to do? That's gonna look fun on camera. So for tier 2, there's some essential components. First of all, you need administrative support. Obviously, you always need administrative support, but not just that, in terms of being able to have the time, the teaming resources, that sort of a thing. Here's the biggie. We want tier 1 implemented with fidelity. So if you're using a fidelity measure like most schools in Nevada use the tiered fidelity inventory, we're looking for an overall implementation percentage of 70% or greater. Now, you're really in a good place if you have 70% over 3 data points. So not just once I hit it and I'm magical, now go forth and prosper in tier 2, but I'm sustaining that high level of implementation, right? Staff buy-in is important. For tier 2, honestly, it's never been an issue for me. I've never had a staff say, I don't want tier 2 support, because they're begging for what's next, right? But maybe you have that issue. I haven't yet. Low levels of significant changes in school climates. So there's always changes, right? I was sitting next to a nice principal at lunch, and she said, you know what, they're literally tearing down my school. We're in a temporary building. I'm getting 14 new teachers. Half of the students in our population are coming over from another zone. We don't know who these students are. We were going to be implementing tier 2 this year. We're just gonna spend another year at tier 1. And I'm like, that sounds like a really good idea, right? So when I'm alluding to this, I'm talking about, yeah, changes happen, but when you've got big change coming, restructuring, half your staff in, half your staff out, we want to think twice about these sorts of things. Maybe tier 2 isn't right for you right now. And also having tier 2 implementation being a top priority. Okay, so not only do we want school-wide implementation at high fidelity, but really importantly, is classroom support. So there are 9 evidence-based effective best practices for classroom implementation. We really want to make sure that those are in place before moving the whole school system to tier 2, because what happens is, maybe you have a guess, what do you think happens? Tier 2 fails. You know why? We get a lot of false positives that are flagging for, oh my gosh, this kid needs something else, when really they just need better, predictable, safer, more consistent routines within the classroom, right? So oftentimes when we miss that classroom level of implementation, we have kids that are sort of rising up, and they're not rising up, there's just nothing there to catch them. There's no core, right, in terms of classroom implementation. So really check on your classroom systems. Okay, universal screening. Has anyone done universal screening before? Has anyone done universal screening for behavior before? Okay, 50% of the 2 people, that's 1 person, cool. All right, well this is new, but it's not. So when I bring up universal screening with districts, they start to be like, oh my God, you're gonna screen my students for mental health and behavioral health concerns? I don't have the bravery to do that, right? Like this is a common response. People get really anxious, people get really concerned about, oh my God, what are you doing? We're not talking about ABCs anymore, right? Well, what are we gonna do? I wanna tell you, my friends, we have been universally screening for decades. All the time. Think about all the academic universal screeners. So when I say universal, it means all. When I say screener, it means a pulse check on how kids are performing. Now, what kind of screener you do will look into different areas. So these are examples, whether you do DIBELS or AIMSweb or any MAP testing, any of those things, screen sort of like, do I have concerns academically, right? In PBIS, we're looking at social, behavioral, emotional type of indicators as opposed to academic ones. So what I like to say is, from a PBIS side, our universal screeners is the exact same thing, just with a different purpose. We're just looking at a different data set, right? So when you screen, that data is going to be used to define what kind of instruction your students need, what the risk level is, what kind of interventions you might need to provide. Now, some schools are really transparent, and they say everybody's gonna know their screening score, everyone's gonna know what the results are, and some schools are very tight-lipped about this, and honestly, I think it's more of a cultural thing. I know some teams that won't even tell the classroom teachers how their students screen out. And then some who are like, whatever, this is our place, this is our business, we're all in it together. Everyone has sort of different intentions for why they would choose to share or not to share some data. I can share some examples with you later. But really, we want to hit home that screening is just an assessment and it's not diagnostic. So if I'm screening Jody here, who's my clicking Vanna, and she comes out at a high level of risk on her social emotional screener, her behavioral universal screener, I would not say, oh my gosh, Jody needs to go to the psychiatric hospital right now. She needs to get an IEP. She needs to get all the supports we have, right? Because we know that's just one data point and that's silly. If a kid bombs an oral reading fluency probe, we're not like, get this kid on an IEP right now. We're like, wow, that was one really terrible data point, right? We take it in context. And with universal screening, we need to do the same thing, right? One data point does not define a child. When does it happen? Well, this is really confusing because you're in a tier 2 talk, right? And I'm talking about universal, which usually implies tier 1, right? Tier 1. So this is a little confusing. Universal screening indeed means universal means all students, which is a tier 1 thing. But if you look in the research and you look in the fidelity measures, universal screening as a practice doesn't come on until you begin implementing tier 2 supports. Any guesses why?
It shows a very small percentage that are benefiting from tier 1 alone.
Yeah. So you want to know who is tier 1 sort of working for as an outcome measure, but also if I do screen students and they do flag positive as needing additional support, or as I kind of say, they pop hot, right? If a kid pops hot for needing some additional support, I don't have anywhere to send them if I only have tier 1 supports in place. I have an ethical dilemma that now I know all these kids need support. Sad day for you, I don't have anything to give you, right? So for this reason, we don't do universal screening, and I am like, hold the phone, because people get really excited. This is a great tool. Other principals have said this is amazing. Go share, prosper, tell all your friends about it. And I'm like, please don't, right? Please don't. Wait until you have your systems in place, because what are you gonna do with those students when they show up, right? We have an obligation. Yeah. Okay. I talked about all that. Good for me. Okay. Carrying on. It's a lot easier when it's independent. Carrying on. Yeah. So this is actually universal screening data from one of the schools that is in our school climate transformation project. This was their first universal screening data ever. Notice it's aggregated as school-wide, there's nothing scary on here. But what's really interesting is in terms of their universal screening data, they are able to look and see what percentage of our students are at low risk, right? And for them that was about 84%. What percentage of our students at the yellow are at moderate risk? For them that was about 12%. And what percentage of our students are at high risk? For them it was about 4%, right? This was looking really healthy. So they're able to look not only in, who are these students that have moderate and high risk, but also this was about 2.5 years ago. Every time that they've screened since then, they put triangle next to triangle next to triangle next to triangle so they can see if their population needs are getting, if they're increasing concerns, decreasing concerns, if the tier 3 is getting heavier, if it's getting lighter. So it becomes not only a formative measure, but a summative measure of sort of the health and the outcomes of our building. Make sure there are a lot of different universal screenings out there. And like Kent said, there are a lot of people who publish a lot of things, who make a lot of money, and good for them. That's not us, right? PBIS is very much open source. What's ours is yours. I'm a big believer in free, low cost, no cost. Whatever universal screening procedure you choose, I'm just going to advocate that it please, please, please considers not only externalizing behavior concerns, so when I say that I'm saying things that act out, things that you notice, things that are loud, things that seem aggressive, things that people have a hard time not noticing, right? But just as importantly, those internalizing behavior concerns, right? These are the things that we often sort of sweep under the rug, right? The kid who internalizes, cries, withdraws, is shy, perhaps socially awkward. Are those kids coming to mind? Do you know these kids? Oftentimes teachers are less likely to refer those students for advanced tier supports because they're not bothering anybody but perhaps themselves, right? And decades of research, years and years and years go by, and event after event after event goes by, and whenever a kid blows, and blows really big, and tragic things happen, almost always it is a student who has had intensive internalizing behavioral concerns that we have left gone unaddressed for way too long, right? So please, if I ask you anything, please include a screener with internalizing behavior concerns, okay? If you don't want to pay a lot or you want to pay for free things, there's this nice chart. Jody's going to click 1, click 2. That has pros and cons of the free or low cost to no cost screeners that are accessible for anybody on the planet. I'm a big fan and believer in the SSRSIE, which is the Student Risk Screening Scale, internalizing, externalizing. Number 1, because it's free and open source. Number 2, because it automatically visualizing graphs your data for you. I mean, it's the best of both worlds, right? So I'm not going to train on the screener. I'm just going to tell you when do you do it. Well, you're going to do it at the bare minimum after the first 30 days of school. The first month of school has to elapse. Why do you think that is? Great thought. Tier 1, do that first. Yes, prevention, indeed. And there's another reason too. Oh, you mean I gotta know them to answer some questions about them? Yeah, so it's really hard if you have a new kid in class and it's screening time and you're like, I can't tell you nothing about Scott. You know? But maybe next time, right? So we have to sort of get to know our kids a little bit. The fidelity standard, if you're looking at a fidelity measure, it's just like academic screening. Gold star standard would be you're universally screening 3 times a year. When you're first bringing on tier 2, I tell my teams, I'm really proud of you if you do it once this year. The year after, if you do it twice, you're like a rock star. Once you get real fluent, 3 times a year is not undoable, but I don't think that's a really easy expectation to meet right out of the gate, okay? Being real with you. Okay. Yeah, so what might you do? This is a paper screener. This is as archaic as it gets. But let's say I have my students, my class list down the left. Look at me, so lucky I only have 8 pseudo students, right? And I'm just putting on here, there's behavior concerns across the top. A 0 is I have no concerns, a 1 is I have sometimes, a 2 is I have often, a 3 I have always, right? And then I just quantify my way across. There's a key for this. What's my externalizing concerns, my internalizing concerns, and my total in Jody? Looky there, there's cut scores and it corresponds to colors just like the pyramid, right? If a kid pops off as red, does that mean they're tier 3? Oh no, that's just one data point, right? But it's definitely something that I'm gonna wanna look at. Okay, this is something that actually one of my coaches came up with that was super cool. She calls it the life cycle of tier 2. Good for her. And I was like, that is so good. I'm going to use that. You just get so proud of the people, right? So if you're kind of looking through how do you start tier 2, right? It starts off with that universal screening, right? Then you move into data triangulation. So I think we're going to go there next. No, I'm not. Apparently I'm not. But that's the life cycle. I don't know what I thought happened next, but this is what happens next. I'm going to talk about tier 2 interventions. Go ahead. Yeah, you can ask a question. Oh, you want my head out of it? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, go on that. Okay, tier 2 interventions. I told you I would give you some easy ones. Before we talk about what are good tier 2 interventions, I need to talk about what is an intervention. So my very first PBIS external coach was an amazing person, first behavior analyst I ever met. His name was Greg Govan, and he came to my site and he said, interventions always involve 2 things. I'd been teaching for an embarrassingly long time before I learned this definition. An intervention always has to include instruction and assessment. Maybe you guys aren't as enlightened by that as I was at the time, but to do a tier 2 intervention, we can't just teach people things and we can't just progress monitor. We have to actually do both, right? And beware of things that aren't interventions. So we have a lot of things that are just policies or practice or things that live on paper that aren't actual interventions because they either are missing the instructional component or they're missing the assessment component. So before we go any more forward, just know that, okay? When you're actually looking at what qualifies as a tier 2 intervention, it's pretty nebulous, which is why people get a little bit scared. To have critical features of an intervention, you need to have additional instruction, right? Or time for skill development. This is a lot of what Nancy was talking about this morning. You need extra opportunities to respond and get some feedback, right? Increased opportunities for feedback and increased structure and predictability. That could cover a lot of different things, right? I'm almost scared about how much can fit under that umbrella. But some of the common ones, I told you, I'm going to give you the baby versions of some to get started that are high potency. The first one being the behavior education program or check-in, check-out. Can you show me if you've heard of that? Okay, wow, all right, look at you guys. Way to go. So that's one of them. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Social skills training, also known as social academic instructional groups. Anyone heard of social skills instruction? Okay, so they're small targeted groups. And then at the high school level, check-in connect mentoring. Anybody heard of that? Okay, cool. Wow, that's big and new and fun and different. Cool. So what is check-in, check-out? Essentially, check-in, check-out is really effective. The research actually shows that about 70% of the students that are put into check-in, check-out will positively respond. And that's actually an absurdly high response rate for a tier 2 intervention. That's just really phenomenal. It goes from actually pre-K to K. There's even some college applications of check-in, check-out. There's a daily behavioral support, high rates of feedback, and there is an opportunity for home to school connection. Some people have come back to me and said, Casey, the parents aren't engaging with this intervention, therefore we can't do it. Say there is an opportunity for home to school connection. It is not a mandatory critical component of it, right? So don't throw it out if I can't get the home bot in. The critical features of that intervention, which are providing the additional feedback, providing the additional structure, all of those things still operate within the school day, regardless of the continuation at home. Do we encourage continuation at home? Yeah. Do you always get it? No, right? That doesn't mean throw the baby out with the bathwater. Another thing is using your social emotional learning curricula. How many of you do any SEL curricula? Okay, counselors are awesome at this particularly. Something that is my bugaboo, just my pet peeve, is that not all SEL programs are created equally, right? People are like, SEL is great. I agree, right? But not all SEL programs are geared for the same thing. They all sort of have different outcomes. So when people say, oh my gosh, I had this assistant superintendent who just left one of our Nevada school districts, went to California, good for him, emailed his district back and said, I just went to a Strong Kids training, and I think all of you guys back home should be doing Strong Kids. Casey, what do you think about Strong Kids? And I say use your data and tell me if Strong Kids is going to meet your need, right? Don't just get excited about the program. And God bless them, right? Best of intentions. So you need to figure out, what does that social emotional curricula that you are teaching or hoping to supplement with, what does that target? So if you have students that are engaging in like high rates of physical or social aggression, then PATHS might be a great program because it specifically targets aggressive behavior, right? If you have secondary students who are at risk for gang-related behavior, great might be great for you. If you have students that are needing some like mindfulness, self-image work, that sort of thing, Positive Action has great research. So when you say you don't just go shoot from the hip and pick an SEL curricula. I need to say, what are the needs that you have to meet in your school building, right? That should really inform the intervention that you provide. I am a big fan, and I know that Irene's going to talk a little bit more about skill streaming. I'm a fan for a lot of reasons. I'm a fan because, number one, I'm real and it's cheap, right? There are programs that do a lot more lifting for you, but they cost a lot more. Also, what I like about skill streaming is that it works for internalizing student concerns and externalizing student concerns, so it has a great degree of variability in what offers. They have early childhood, adolescent, and for students on the autism spectrum, so depending on who your target population is, nice variance there. So something that if you were going to use Second Step, or if you were going to use, this is right out of skill streaming, you would want to look and say, for my students who have internalizing concerns, when I notice this group of students, this sort of puddle of kids that's screened out, what are the skills that this particular group of students need, right? That question is going to choose what components of the curriculum I teach to them, right? Same thing with externalizers. Now, your question about how do I map it back into my Tier 1, I would want to be really explicit with, when I teach these skills, I'm going to link it to what my Tier 1 is. So knowing my feelings, that's part of our SEL self-awareness, right? When I'm talking about avoiding trouble, that's part of my being responsible on the playground, right, in managing myself. So I'm going to have to make that explicit connection. You know, when you're responsible and respectful on the playground, that's how I'm responding to teasing and, you know, dealing with conflict. And when we're teaching it in that Tier 1 context because it's supplemental. And there's some really good progress monitoring ways that you can also loop that in with the feedback sheet too. Cool. Check and connect. Do we have any high school people here? 0, 1, 2, 1.5, okay. All over the place. Check and Connect essentially is for students who are at risk for dropping out, disengaging from high school. So we want to create additional mentoring, sort of like Check In, Check Out, where you have somebody who is external to the classroom environment that is creating a more supportive relationship and nurturing that student, giving more feedback about their attendance, about their grades, and that sort of a thing. Check and Connect has been increasingly manualized over the past few years, so you can actually pick up a packet and run with it in a way that isn't as nebulous as it once was. And with that, and right on time, I'm going to turn it over to Irene to talk a little bit about their rollout of Tier 2 at Lemon Valley Elementary School, and then after that we will take questions and answers.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Irene Rogerson. Like Casey mentioned, I'm the school counselor at Lemon Valley Elementary School, and I've been there 3 years. And so today I'm going to talk to you about a Tier 2 intervention that we put in place with the small groups. And I think what Casey mentioned is so important, that it is it was a team buy-in. We have admin support, we have staff support, and so we were able to do this intervention that was pretty interesting, the outcomes of it, and I think you'll see that. And so initially we looked at our data at Infinite Campus. At first we weren't sure how we were going to put this together, and so as a team we looked at our fourth grade, and because we had a pretty high percentage of fourth grade behaviors that year, we had lost one of our teachers. So our classrooms were about 30 to 35 students per class, so there was a lot going on in there. But what we decided as we used the universal screener, we saw that we had a lot of externalizers, but we also had a lot of students having internalizing behavior as well. And we realized that we were servicing a lot of our externalizing students already, right? Because they're the ones that are really making themselves known. And so, as Casey pointed out, a lot of our internalizers, some of them had passive aggressive behaviors. You know, they would punch someone here or there, or they would say some words. They would have some disagreements with staff and students, but it wasn't enough to say, oh, this kid's really got a problem in behavior. And so we used the screener. We gave it to all our fourth grade teachers to fill out, and so each teacher filled out these for each, and then we decided we were going to go and look at more of the internalizing behaviors, which are, you know, emotionally flat, maybe they're withdrawn, sad or depressed, anxious or lonely. And so we identified our students based on this screening. And so we identified we had 4 classrooms of fourth grade, 2 students of each, so we identified 8 students that we were going to put in groups. And we were identifying them as internalizing. These were kids, again, like I said, they were more passive aggressive. A lot of times they were loners. Maybe they would just shut down in class. They would put their heads down, just not engage. You know, they weren't enough to cause a problem, but they were definitely standing out. So as part of this process, was not our typical groups that we had, you know, that maybe kids with IEPs with behaviors. And so what we did was we compiled a letter telling families exactly what we would be doing. For 6 weeks, we were going to work on 6 skills. And how we picked those 6 skills were use the skill streaming book, and we asked the fourth grade teachers, okay, out of all these skills that internalizers can have, can you please rate which ones you would identify that these kids would need? And so then we picked 6 skills out of that, got our permission forms signed, and we broke the kiddos up into 2 groups of 4. And we used the kids who were in the same class together so they'd have that support system. So they weren't just, you know, with all random new kids, but there were 2 kids from each class. And so they knew each other. They knew another person. So this was a letter, just kind of went through, again, the skills that we identified that our kids were going to use, that our teachers identified was introducing themselves, beginning a conversation, joining in a group, dealing with being left out, and feeling embarrassed, and then dealing with group pressure. And so this letter went home along with the next one, which was, again, just telling the family, this is what our group's going to be about. These are the skills we're working on. It's going to be 6 weeks, so it's a short group. That's what we identified it as. And we sent this home. But I want to tell you, I got to tell you, at the end, I'll tell you, but our kids were so bought in and felt so connected to each other that this group went the rest of the year, okay? Because it wasn't something I could dissolve. I just want to let you know that. So we did use the skill streaming book. Again, it was based on the teacher's observation. 6 pro-social skills were identified. How to introduce themselves, like I said, begin a conversation, join a group, dealing with being left out, dealing with embarrassment, dealing with group pressure. And then we would teach the skill. So the kids would come in. I always do an opening. I don't know if you know Mind Up. Do any of you know Mind Up for SEL? Okay, so we kind of do like a little intro, kind of check in, see how we're doing. Then we would go to a skill, a specific skill, and you'll see they each week had a specific skill that we would teach. We would role play it inside the lesson, and then they would role play it with each other. Then they'd have homework to go home and practice the skill. And then the following week, they'd come back and say, yeah, I worked on this skill. Or no, I didn't really have an opportunity. And then I'd send a homework, and then we review it for the following week. So each week, we identified the same time that they would come. They're half-an-hour sessions. There'd be a homework assignment. And we would introduce a new skill each week. And honestly, it was the practical application that was really helpful. When the kids would come back and share and say, yeah, you know, I was feeling left out on the playground. This is what I did to join that group. You know, I didn't know this new person. This is how I introduced myself. So some of these kiddos really, in the beginning, didn't even want to say who they were. Like, it was really difficult for them to say, hi, my name is, you know, and I'm in this classroom. And through the process of this group, I just saw these kids change. Honestly, they made these connections to each other, and with me, and they felt there was much more of a safety that maybe they didn't have before, another place they could go to express themselves. Because again, like Casey mentioned, the internalizers, right? These are those kids that just stuff it. They just stuff a lot. And the problem is, you can't stuff it for only so long. You know, you can stuff it for only so long, and then it's going to blow, or some of these other behaviors are going to come out. So this was a really unique experience for us. It was really beautiful, honestly, to see these kids who are kind of even scared to be in this group at first, to really want this group. And again, when we took that little vote to dissolve it or not, it was like, oh no, you can. We need this group. We're keeping it. And so they took ownership of it. So this is the book, like Casey saw earlier. It's the one for the elementary school, and this is the book we use. And so this is a sample, and I'm sorry it didn't come out so great, but you know, dealing with being left out. So this is just a brief example of one of the activities that we had. And so it just kind of goes through some steps, decide what will happen when you feel left out, discuss some possible solutions to doing that, and then I taught the skill. You know, how do you do it? You know, how do you ask to join in? You know, how do you choose someone to play with? How do you identify that person? And then doing the activity. And so we would do this skill. Then we'd have them role play, which of course they were embarrassed at first. A lot of these internalizers don't want to give you eye contact. They don't want to engage with each other. But by the end, they were really, really connecting with one another. And so we do that, and then there'd be homework. And they'd go home and they'd share this with their families. And I asked them to participate with their families if they didn't have a friend to work with. But you know, tell your parents about what we're doing, and then how did it work out for you? Did you practice this skill? Did you feel, you know, how you could handle it if you were being left out? And so then they would circle it, identify it, and then we'd go to the next skill. So that's just an example of one. Okay, so there is a great way, like Casey said, instruction and then assessment. And so what's wonderful about the skills streaming book is that it gives you a pre and a post test in a sense. It gives you like a cut and paste, introducing yourself. Kids could identify, you know, where they stood with this. And so I cut and pasted. We kind of identified what skills we were working on, those 6 skills, and then we did a pre and a post test. The students would take a pre-test in the beginning before I ever taught a skill, and then at the end of the 6 weeks, they did a post test, as well as the teachers also took a pre and a post test of the skills. Okay. So we used the Likert scale. It's 1 to 5. Again, 1 indicating they most never did this. So like introducing yourself. Do you feel like comfortable introducing yourself? 1, almost never. 2, seldom. 3, sometimes. 4, often. 5, almost always. And so they would go 1 to 5. And then we looked at the gains after this. So they did the pre and the post test. The teachers, okay. So the students, let's say, reflected that all of their skills gained. They were reporting an increase on all the skills that they were taught. The students reported gains in all areas. The teachers' pre and post tests reflected 5 out of the 6 pro-social skills taught reported gains. So the only skill that didn't report, that had no change, was dealing with group pressure. And so that's like a long-term skill, you know, but 5 out of 6 reported that they saw observable student behavior change within 6 weeks. So that was really good. The teachers reported within that 6-week period that 5 out of those 6 skills they taught. Okay, so the student checklist again, we'll just go to the next one to show you. So this was a pre-test. Again, is it easy for you to introduce yourself, to meet people? This kiddo was saying 3. Okay, they were saying sometimes. They said, is it easy for me to start a conversation with someone? This kid reported a 1. Do I ask to join in a game or activity in a friendly way? So this kid felt pretty confident in that area. Do I decide if I've been left out, then do things, what do I do that makes me feel better? Because sometimes we all feel left out. Sometimes, you know, kids don't want to play with each other. So you said a 3. Do I do things that help me feel less embarrassed? 1. Wasn't sure what to do there. And when a group of kids want me to do something that I might get in trouble or wrong, do I say no? Okay, said 1 on that. So this was his post test. So you could see that all of his reporting changed. I mean, and this you know, this was after a 6-week period. This is no prompting. It's just like reading it again. How do you feel now? And so this kiddo reported gains in every area, quite significant gains. And then the next one was just the teacher reported. This is the same student. The teacher did a pre. This is where she rated that student. And then this was her teacher's checklist post. And so she, again, reported significant gains for the student as well. So overall, you know, we had an idea when we first went into Tier 2 what we thought this screening was going to be. We thought, okay, we know what we're going to do. There's always these externalizing children, right, that we know need the support. But as we went into this process, we realized, hey, our externalizing kiddos need just as much support. The screener was a great tool. It helped us to break down some specific behaviors and maybe to identify a few kiddos that kind of were outliners that we didn't really know would be, you know, singled out as we looked up in the numbers. And again, like I said, what I found was so wonderful and encouraging about this group was that they loved it so much that they did not want to dissolve it. We continued throughout the year. We used some of social skills. We did some other stuff as well. But they developed a network of support. And they were needing very much of that support. And so this was a great experience. I think the kiddos were really happy to have someone to connect with, as well as the teachers were excited about some of the supports and the gains that they saw their kiddos going through. And even the families were really happy that their kids, who maybe typically just kind of go under the radar a little bit, were getting this additional support. And they also saw some positive impact. So, you know, I just say kind of be open. You know, sometimes we go into screener and we go into a group or something that we're going to develop. We already have a preconceived idea of what maybe it would look like. But using a universal screener, getting feedback from a team and having that support can really broaden your perspective. And it was just a great experience. And you know, I really appreciate Casey helping us too. With, you know, the book is fabulous. I have to tell you, it's very simple. Anyone can use it. Anyone can, you know, access it and be able to look at the pre and post data. Is very simple to put together. And so, you know, as a team, we really enjoyed it, and we felt it was a very successful Tier 2 intervention that we put in place. Okay, so thank you. I don't know if you have any